Dust stirred in the late afternoon sun, casting a golden hue over the barren fields. Silas stood tall, his calloused hands resting on his hips, watching the horizon like a sentinel guarding his silent world. Loneliness enveloped him, the quiet stretching miles around, punctuated only by the sound of distant crows. Then she appeared, a flicker of movement amidst the dry grass. Elowen. Her delicate frame, draped in a faded dress, moved as if the wind itself guided her. Dark hair tumbled around her face, framing wide, innocent eyes that spoke in silence. The townsfolk whispered of her, a girl marked by misfortune, but in her presence the weight of his solitude lifted, and for the first time in years, hope threaded through Silas's heart. He watched as she knelt among the parched earth, fingers brushing the soil, and felt the first stirrings of life awaken all around them. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long shadows that wove through the dusty streets of the small town. Elowen stepped off the wagon, the creaking wooden wheels echoing in the stillness. Her heart raced, each beat a throb of bitter memory. She clutched the burlap bag to her chest, her fingers twitching with the urge to flee. The townsfolk, with their whispering glances, made her feel like a wild animal caught in a trap. No one could see the chains that bound her, the weight of betrayal hanging like a shroud. Silas stood across the street, leaning against the wooden post of the saloon. The sun glinted off his hat, casting a shadow over his stoic face. He had heard the rumors, how a girl named Elowen was arriving, sold by her own brother like a piece of livestock. As she stepped forward, he felt something in his chest tighten. Her eyes, dark and wide, held a brightness that belied her fragile state. He didn't know her story, but the remnants of untold grief lay heavy in the air around her. As Elowen walked past, Silas caught a whiff of something earthy and sweet, a scent tangled with regret and longing. He watched her, the way she held herself, each step laden with hesitation. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, yet the fear and confusion painted on her face drew him in, igniting a spark of protectiveness. Silas wasn't a man given to softness or sentimentality, but there was something about her that felt like the start of a storm. It unsettled him, made the dirt beneath his feet feel more like quicksand. The townsfolk whispered behind closed doors, sharing tales of curses and dark omens. Elowen's brother, desperate for coin, had sold his sister for a pittance, demeaning her with a label that clung tight. She was a girl touched by misfortune. They said her very presence brought with it a tide of bad luck. Silas, listening to their chatter, felt a simmering anger rise within him. They didn't know her, not really. They saw only the surface, the facade of a girl lost in a sea of dread, condemned before she ever had a chance to breathe. Elowen stood in front of the makeshift wooden stall, her eyes searching the horizon for a bygone familiarity. The warmth of the setting sun illuminated her as she confronted the harsh reality she had been thrust into. She had trusted her brother, believed in the bonds of blood, but betrayal cut deeper than a knife. No amount of warmth from the sun could thaw the chill of abandonment that gripped her heart. The whispers taunted her, a cruel echo. Cursed, cursed. Silas shifted from his post, compelled by an instinct he couldn't name. He stepped forward, breaking through the invisible wall between them. Gaze steady, he approached Elowen, who flinched at his presence, as if expecting another blow. Silas saw the way her shoulders tensed, a small bird ready to take flight. He meant to speak, to offer comfort, but the words fell heavy in his throat, caught by the weight of the moment. "What's your name?" he finally asked, voice steady yet gentle. Elowen blinked, confusion mingling with a flicker of trust. "Elowen," she whispered, barely audible against the backdrop of their surroundings. The wind carried the word, fragile and fleeting, and Silas felt the enormity of it settle between them. Elowen was a name wrapped in sorrow, yet there was a kind of strength hidden within its syllables. In that moment, Silas understood the distance between them, a chasm not just of circumstance, but of unspoken fears and haunting memories. He felt an urge to reach out, to bridge the void. Yet something held him back, a cautious respect for the raw ache that resided in her. While the air crackled with unacknowledged potential, the silent barriers between them loomed larger. Elowyn looked at him with guarded eyes, as if he were both a savior and another potential source of hurt. With time, under the fading light of the sun, silence spread like a blanket over them, heavy and foreboding. As the stars began to prick the night sky, Silas realized they were both adrift in their own storms, Elowyn with her past, and he with the spectre of his own solitude. They stood together, two lost souls marked by their histories, silent witnesses to the world around them, feeling the distance that still separated them like a stark reminder of the battles ahead. A swirling dust cloud announced Elowyn's arrival at the ranch, the sun glaring in different rays upon the parched earth. She stepped down from the wagon, her heart racing as she surveyed the vastness that stretched before her. Silas stood beneath the shade of a lone, weathered oak, the silhouette of his broad frame outlined against the horizon, his hands resting on his belt. He didn't move to greet her, just watched with an inscrutable expression that sent a shiver down her spine. Elowyn adjusted the brim of her hat, casting her eyes away from his steady gaze. She clutched the worn leather strap of her valise, as if it were a lifeline to the past she had fled. Stepping closer, the crunch of gravel beneath her boots shattered the silence that hung heavy in the air. She felt the weight of his scrutiny, taking measure of her in her worn dress, hair pulled back in a hasty braid. She wondered if he could sense the storm within her, a tempest of fear, hope, and the whispers that had followed her from town to town. Silas finally moved, gesturing toward the barn with a nod, his voice a low rumble. Elowyn followed, her heart pounding with each step. Inside, the scent of hay and horses greeted her, a stark contrast to the emptiness she had felt for so long. The barn was a world unto itself, where shadows lingered like memories and the soft rustle of animals filled the silence left by unwelcome history. She caught a glimpse of Silas as he settled into routine, his movements deliberate and calm, a stark contrast to the chaos that had plagued her life before. Days bled into one another, the sun rising and setting in an endless cycle of weary labor. Elowyn tended to the animals, her hands growing calloused, but her spirit finding a strange solace in the rhythm of days spent among the creatures. Silas remained a mystery, his presence both grounding and unnerving. He seldom spoke, reserved yet steady, as if guarding something deep within that he dared not reveal. She caught fleeting glimpses of pain in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking, but every time she opened her mouth to ask, words seemed to falter on her tongue. At night, the sky unfurled into a tapestry of stars, and Elowyn would often sit alone on the porch, the cool breeze wrapping around her like a blanket. The stars twinkled with a brilliance that felt both inviting and isolating. Silas would linger within view, the shadows draping over him, his silhouette hardly shifting as he carved the silence with invisible burdens. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the gulf between them, but fear held her back, tethered by the stories she had heard, the whispers of a girl cursed and the man who chose to harbor her. One evening, after the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Silas stepped out onto the porch, the wooden planks creaking beneath his weight. Elowyn watched him, the contours of his face softened in the twilight. He stood beside her, body language cautious yet inviting. "You know," he finally said, voice gravelly, "the crops ain't much to speak of. They've been dry for a spell." Elowyn turned to face him, surprised by the sudden openness. "It's all right. This land has its own heart. It just needs time," she replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty knotting in her stomach. He met her gaze then, something flickering in the depths of their shared silence. A recognition of struggles woven from similar threads, two souls adrift in the vast emptiness of their lives. As days turned to weeks, Elowyn noticed changes around the ranch, subtle but undeniable. The soil seemed to breathe again, drawing moisture from the air, the first green shoots reaching up toward the sun like desperate fingers. Silas worked harder, a fire igniting within him that Elowen had never seen before. She caught him humming occasionally, the sound low and melodic, a secret offering to the promise of life sprouting anew. She felt a spark of hope ignite within her, the kind she hadn't allowed herself to envision since leaving everything behind. Underneath the weight of unspoken emotions, Elowen began to understand that perhaps she was not a curse after all. With Silas by her side, she felt the world transforming, pieces falling into place like a puzzle long shattered. In the quiet moments shared on the porch and the gentle laughter breathed into the open night, they began to navigate the fragile terrain of their hearts. The emptiness that had once overwhelmed them slowly began to fill, replacing desolation with possibility amidst the crops that would not just grow but thrive, a testament to the bond they were only beginning to uncover. The sun rose each morning in a delicate wash of golden light, stretching its beams across the rugged landscape that Elowen had come to associate with safety. Silas's farmhouse stood as an island of stability amid the wild prairie, the wooden walls a patchwork of age and resilience. Each day began with the rhythmic sounds of the earth stirring awake, the creak of the barn doors, the low, lazy calls of the cattle, and the soft rustle of the wind through the grass. Silas had his routines, errands that carved out the time like a well-worn path through the hills. He would rise before dawn, pouring himself coffee black enough to make his stomach churn, and then head outside to till the soil, coaxing life from the land. Elowen, on the other hand, awoke to a fluttering sense of displacement, the tinge of unease that shadowed her every move. She had never known stability, let alone the ordinary rhythm of farm life. Instead, her mornings began with an urgency to contribute, a need to belong that outpaced her lingering fears. After Silas had left for the fields, she would immerse herself in chores, scrubbing, cleaning, sorting through the remnants of his solitary life. The farmhouse felt foreign. It had slipped through the cracks of her days like a dream, yet she tired of the uncanny silence that echoed between them. As the days passed, Elowen's hands became calloused, her muscles familiar with the heavy work of labor. She found solace in the act of caring for the crops, interlacing her fingers through the rich, dark earth. Silas watched her from a distance, intrigued by her determination, but equally wary of the shadows that danced behind her eyes. They shared a muted understanding, forged in glances that lingered a moment too long. Elowen's laughter, once a fragile thing, began to blossom like the seeds sprouting in their fields. Yet beneath that laughter lay an undercurrent of anxiety, a remnant of the curse that haunted her. Silas found himself retreating to the fields more often than necessary, the sun setting a canvas of amber and crimson while he pulled stubborn weeds from the rows. Each day the crops flourished, transforming the barren land into a tapestry of green hope, and he dared to imagine that Elowen's presence was a catalyst for this miracle. He sought her out between tasks, hesitant, his words wrapped in the layers of his own uncertainty. "You've got a gift, Elowen," he offered early one afternoon, his brow furrowed against the harsh glare of sunlight. "The land seems to listen to you." Elowen's smile faltered. "A gift," she echoed, her voice a whisper against the breeze. "Or perhaps a curse." Her past clung to her like a shroud, fear and isolation woven through her heart. Silas saw the moment her walls began to rise, felt the chasm that opened between them, a jagged reminder of the weight they both carried. "You can't keep believing that," he urged, his tone warm, though laced with a firmness that startled her. "You're not just a ghost from the past, you're here now." But it was as if her turmoil wrapped around her like a vine, suffocating the spark Silas tried to ignite. She looked away, feeling the vulnerability of her own truth. "You don't know what I'm capable of," she replied, the unsteady tremor in her voice betraying the defiance she tried to muster. Silas softened, stepping quietly towards her, his hands reaching out instinctively before falling back to his sides. "It scares me too," he admitted, his honesty raw enough to cut through the tension. "But there's something good growing here, Eloan, not just in the fields." She met his gaze, and for a brief moment, the veil of her fears lifted, revealing the flicker of a connection they had been building amidst the silence. But that warmth was soon shadowed by the chill of doubt. "I can't shake it off that easily," she murmured, a fragile plea hanging between them. Silas wanted nothing more than to assure her, but every word felt like a step too close to the dangerous precipice of her past. Would she ever trust him fully, or would she remain forever poised on the edge of anxiety, fearful of what she might bring into his life? As dusk settled, the shadows stretched long across the fields, encasing them in a cocoon of fading light. They stood apart, yet together, two souls bound by the land and a growing uncertainty that neither dared to label. Silas watched as Eloan turned to face the horizon, her back to him, the weight of her struggle evident in the way her shoulders sagged. "We're growing something here," he finally ventured, his voice a gentle tug at the boundary of their resolve. "If you let it, the light can fill even the darkest corners." Eloan closed her eyes, the last rays of sun warming her skin, but the darkness of her heart felt unyielding. Could she allow Silas into her world without risking his peace? As her fingers fumbled with the loose strands of her hair, she wrestled with the possibility of surrendering her fear for a chance at belonging. The air crackled with unspoken words, the promise of their intertwined futures lingering, waiting for the courage to bloom. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. Eloan stood at the edge of Silas's cornfield, her bare feet sinking into the rich, dark earth. She reached down, brushing her fingers over the tender shoots, marveling at their vibrant green, a stark contrast to her own paleness. She had spent countless nights drowning in dreams of curses and past misfortunes, but here, in this moment, the air tasted like hope. Silas watched her from a distance, arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable. He had never known a woman like her, and he had thought that by taking her in, he could shield her from whatever darkness clung to her. But he couldn't ignore the whispers that followed her, even in this quiet place. The townsfolk had warned him, their eyes wide with fear and pity, each story more twisted than the last. A cursed girl. What did he know of curses? Just the tightening of his chest whenever he considered the possibility of losing the only person who had brought warmth into his solitary life. "Silas," Eloan said suddenly, breaking the silence. She turned to him, the sun catching her hair, making a halo of gold around her head. "Do you ever wonder how the world sees us? What they say when we're not listening?" The question hung in the air, laden with a vulnerability that made Silas's heart ache. They stood amidst the swaying corn, two souls entangled in a dance of uncertainty. He shrugged, forcing a casualness he didn't feel. Let 'em talk. Nothing they say matters. But even as he spoke, a seed of doubt took root in him. What if they were right? What if he had invited chaos into his life in the form of this girl? He had never wanted much, just the ability to work the land, to breathe the wild open air, but now he felt the weight of her presence like a yoke on his back. Eloan's gaze fell to the ground, the flicker of her hope extinguished. "You don't understand," she murmured. "They've always whispered of me. They say I bring ruin." The admission slipped from her lips like a confession, heavy with the burden she carried alone. "I've never wanted to bring anything but life, but I can't shake this fear that I'll ruin everything I touch, even you." The wind sighed softly, as if the world itself held its breath. Silas took a cautious step toward her, his heart racing. "You ain't a curse, Eloan. You're here. And look at the crops. They've never grown like this before." His voice was steady, firm in its conviction, but he felt a flicker of fear ignite within him. Did he truly believe that? Or was he just trying to convince himself as much as her? With an impulsive motion, he grasped her hand. the warmth of her skin igniting a spark of something stronger than fear. "Those folks don't know you. You're not what they say. You're—" He stumbled over his words, suddenly aware of how close they stood. The air thickened between them, woven with unspoken truths. "You're special," he finally settled on, his voice barely above a whisper, and in that moment he saw the tears glistening in her eyes. At the vulnerability in his gaze, something fragile broke open in her chest. "You can't mean that," she choked out, the deep-seated doubt rising within her like a storm. "I've always been the shadow that follows Silas, the girl with no family, no past, and now the girl who makes things grow, only to have them taken away." "No," he said firmly, lifting her chin with a gentle finger. "You're not just a shadow. You've got a fire in you, Elowen, and it's made these crops flourish." He could feel the heat radiating between them, the tension thickening the air around them. "I need you to trust me. Trust that you're not a curse. You're my friend, and I won't let anyone take that from you." Elowen's breath caught, and for a fleeting moment, the clouds of doubt parted. Silas stood there, a quiet strength radiating from him that began to chip away at her fears. In his eyes, she saw acceptance, but also a flicker of something deeper, something she longed to reach for. She clenched his hand tighter, as if holding onto him could anchor her against the tumult of unworthy thoughts. And for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe that beneath the weight of the world, she might be seen, truly seen. Elowen knelt in the dirt beside the crumbling fence that separated the field from the thickets of wild grass. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow that danced atop the waves of grain. She pressed her palms into the earth, feeling the warmth seep into her skin, a whisper of life beneath the desolation. Silas watched from a distance, leaning against the barn, his hands tucked into his pockets, his expression unreadable as always. He had never seen her like this, unfettered and raw. The room in his heart reserved for the burden of solitude began to stir. The crops had begun to thrive in ways Silas had only ever dreamed of. Each stalk of wheat reached toward the heavens, responding to something deeper than mere soil and sun. Elowen, with her whispered incantations and laughter that echoed through the empty fields, was beginning to change everything. He had felt it the night she arrived, like a warm current, awakening the long-dormant seeds, clutching the dark earth. But as he watched her, the burgeoning hope was laced with an uncertainty that gnawed at him. Could someone like her truly belong in his quiet, weathered life? As she dug her hands into the soil, Elowen's brow furrowed in concentration, the tips of her fingers flecked with dirt. When she pulled out a tangle of roots, she laughed softly, the sound breaking the seams of silence that enveloped him. It was a melody that seemed to weave through the brittle air, wrapping around him, drawing him closer. Silas felt an inexplicable urge to reach out, to close the distance between them. But he stood still, tethered to the past, the weight of years heavy on his shoulders. "Silas!" Elowen called, her voice like a breeze that stirred the leaves. She looked up, her emerald eyes shimmering in the waning light. "You need to come see this." There was a knowing in her gaze that seemed to cut through the shadows of doubt in his heart. It spoke of connection, of understanding, things he had scarcely allowed himself to hope for. With a slow, deliberate gait, he walked toward her, each step echoing the unsteady rhythm of his heart. She turned to him, her hands now empty, and offered a small, crooked smile that lit up the fading day. There was something about the way she looked at him that felt like an invitation, a bridge formed over the chasm he had built around himself. As he knelt beside her in the cooling dusk, Silas noticed the way the light danced across her features, illuminating the freckles that dusted her cheeks. For a moment, time stood still, and the world faded away, leaving just the two of them. "There's magic here," Elowen whispered, her voice almost a reverent hush. She traced a finger across the surface of the rich, dark earth. It just needed a chance. Silas felt his heart clench at her belief. at the warmth of her spirit that wrapped around him like the embrace of summer. He wanted to confess the weight that had burdened him, the fears that had kept him locked in a solitary existence, but the words tangled inside him, caught between fear and longing. Without thinking, Silas reached out, brushing his fingers across her hand, the warm glow of contact igniting a spark that shot through him. Elowen turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, and in that simple gesture, a world of understanding blossomed between them. The air thickened with unspoken promises, and he could feel the tether of connection pulling them closer, despite the whispers of the past haunting them. "Together, we can make this grow," she said softly, her voice steadying the fluttering chaos within him. Silas nodded, his heart thrumming in agreement. The weight of his solitude felt lighter in her presence, and for the first time, he saw not just the crops thriving around him, but the possibility of something greater, a partnership forged in trust, a connection that strived to break the chains of old legends. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world into shades of twilight, Silas and Elowen sat side by side, their fingers intertwined in the fading light. The land breathed around them, alive with the pulse of cultivation and hope. And in that moment, amidst the rustle of the wind and the quiet song of the night, the shadows began to wane, illuminating the path that lay ahead. A journey where two souls intertwined, battling the curses of the past to nurture something beautiful and real. Elowen stood by the edge of Silas's field, her thin fingers tracing the silhouette of wheat that swayed gently in the evening breeze. The world around her teemed with life, the golden crops burgeoning as if they had sprung from the very soul of the earth. It was a sight she had longed to immerse herself in, yet a weight clung to her throat, suffocating every word she tried to summon. She watched Silas tending to the land, each careful movement resonating with a rhythm she yearned to join, yet her voice felt chained by an unseen force. Silas raised his head, catching the glimmer of twilight reflected in her eyes. The fire within him was fueled by an unspoken bond with the girl they all claimed to be cursed. In her silence, he sensed such depth, a well of unexpressed emotions that seemed to flourish even amid the shadows of her past. He had never pushed her to speak, never forced her into the discomfort of sharing her thoughts, yet as days turned into weeks, her silence gnawed at him, a silent plea woven into the fabric of their newfound life together. The landscape stretched before them, but Elowen saw only a wall. The vibrancy of the crops seemed to mock her inability to articulate the tumult within her. Silas had shown her warmth, had taught her how to coax life from barren soil, yet she remained trapped in a world of muted colors and unvoiced fears. Every time she opened her mouth to speak, she tasted the bitterness of her past, a sharp reminder of the labels and judgments that had defined her. Silas knelt, examining the roots of a plant, unaware of the tempest raging inside her. She wanted to tell him how he had stitched fragments of hope into her heart, that the earth's bounty mirrored the tenderness he offered. But the words slipped through her like grains of sand, elusive and taunting. She clenched her fists, the pulse of her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the earth's heartbeat, but her mind was a prison, one she had built brick by brick in the wake of judgment. "Elowen," Silas called gently, breaking her reverie. The warmth in his voice fluttered through her like a soft breeze. "What do you see when you look at these fields?" He set down his tools and moved closer, his gaze steady and earnest, as if he could unravel the web of silence that cloaked her. She felt his presence, grounding her, and for a moment she longed to respond. There was a flicker of determination within her, a fragile spark ignited by his unwavering faith. The world had stifled her, stung her with the label of being cursed, yet Silas had shared his laughter and dreams, inviting her to shed the weight of the past. Her heart raced, as she battled the urge to speak, to pour out the torrent of feelings she had kept at bay. What if he understood? What if the curse began to dissolve the moment her truth found its voice? Taking a deep breath, Elowen turned toward the expanse of golden wheat, her gaze piercing through the harvest. It's beautiful," she whispered, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. The instant they left her lips, a rush of fear washed over her. She feared the judgment, the scorn of the townsfolk who once condemned her, yet something greater surged within her. She had spoken, and with each syllable, she felt a part of her that had lain dormant begin to awaken. Silas's eyes widened, and a grin spread across his face like the first rays of dawn. "It is," he agreed, the reverence in his tone urging her forward. "But what do you really see, Elowen?" Her heart pounded as the words swelled within her, a tide of emotions fighting for release. "I see hope," she said slowly, her voice gaining strength, the shadows lifting from her spirit. "I see life where there was none. I see the strength of what can grow, and that maybe I can grow too." Each word wove a thread into the tapestry of their connection, and with Silas watching, expectation dancing in his eyes, she felt the barrier crumble, each emotion spilling forth like the fertile rain that nurtured the earth around them. In that moment, amid the swaying fields that sang of rebirth, Elowen crossed the threshold from silence to clarity, freed not just from the chains of her past, but into a shared future that glimmered with promise. The curse wasn't a chain, but a catalyst, proving that even the most weathered souls could bloom anew when embraced by understanding and love. Silas stood at the edge of the field, the golden stalks of wheat bending gently in the evening breeze, each wave shimmering like a heartbeat in a quiet world. The sun was a dying ember, casting a warm glow that painted Elowen's silhouette as she knelt among the crops. For weeks, she had worked side by side with him, pulling weeds, tending to the soil, and learning the rhythms of the land. Each laugh they shared, every secret glance, had cultivated a bond that felt as timeless as the earth itself. Yet, a shadow always lingered, an unspoken fear of the curse that had chased her, haunting her every word, every silenced confession. Elowen raised her head and met Silas's gaze, the weight of her past evident in her emerald eyes. There was something unbreakable in her spirit, yet fragility danced just beneath the surface. He watched as she brushed a tendril of hair behind her ear, the sun's last light catching on the soft strands, casting an ethereal glow around her. Silas didn't need to say anything. He simply stood there, an anchor in the shifting winds of uncertainty. How could he begin to lessen the burden of those haunting rumors that clung to her like chains? All he could do was offer her solace, his quiet strength a refuge from the storm outside. The air thickened with an unsaid tension as a gust swept across the field, sending ripples through the crops, and Elowen's gaze dropped. The moment felt charged, and Silas took a step closer, his heart pounding, trying to bridge the chasm of silence that had grown between them. He remembered the day she arrived, a ghost in the sunset, their meeting a collision of two solitary worlds. Those first nights, she had slept beneath the stars, the blanket of darkness wrapping around her like an embrace, while Silas kept watch, hoping that on some level she could feel his presence. "Silas," she whispered, breaking the stillness, her voice trembling like a leaf about to fall. He stepped back, the name hanging in the air like a sacred promise. It felt so strange, so sacred. She had never spoken his name as if it were an incantation, nor had he dared to utter hers with such reverence. But now, as it slipped past her lips, he felt a crack in the walls she had built around her heart. Her vulnerability bared itself in this small act, like the first soft rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. A tremor coursed through her, fingers clutching the earth as if it could ground her through the tremors of fear. Silas allowed the moment to linger, his heart racing with the weight of the name entwined with his own. "Elowen," he murmured, testing the rhythm of their connection. The syllables felt alive, as if they were weaving a tapestry that bound them together tighter than any shared labor ever could. What she carried inside her had become a part of him, a shared understanding buried within the walls of their hearts, a spark of hope born from the ashes of despair. Eluan rose slowly, brushing off the dirt from her hands, and took a step forward, the evening light casting a halo around her. She was a warrior, standing unyielding against the judgmental whispers that had followed her like shadows. "Silas," she repeated, louder, her voice brimming with newfound strength, the syllables swirling with emotions that threatened to spill over. "I thought I was cursed. I thought I could never belong, never be free." But a wave of determination broke over her face, illuminating the depths inside her. "But you came," she continued, her breath steadying, "and showed me what it means to grow. I can feel it in this land, in the way the crops flourish under your care, and in my heart the way you welcomed me without fear." The confession poured out of her, every word a stone lifted from her chest. Silas could see the clouds of doubt beginning to disperse, revealing the shimmering light of hope that had long been shrouded in mist. Silas stepped forward, the distance between them shrinking until he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, a warmth that no curse could extinguish. "Eloan," he said softly, his voice a gravelly promise, "you are not cursed. You are strong, more than you know. Together we've cultivated something beautiful, something that defies all those chains." For the first time, their eyes locked, and in that shared gaze, an unspoken understanding blossomed, a mutual promise that they were no longer bound by the shadows of their pasts. They were free to grow, together and apart, planting hope in the soil of their hearts. Silas took her hands, their fingers entwining as the evening stars began to twinkle overhead, a constellation of dreams igniting the night. Under the golden hue of the setting sun, the horizon stretched wide, a canvas painted with the promise of tomorrow. Eloan knelt in the rich earth, fingers dancing through the soil as if weaving a tapestry of life. Silas stood nearby, watching, the weight of his past lifting with each gentle breeze that whispered through the tall grasses. A single butterfly, delicate and bright, flitted from flower to flower, drawing both their gazes. In that moment, time held its breath. The air shimmered with unspoken understanding. Eloan's hands paused and she looked up, meeting Silas's eyes where shadows of doubt had once lingered. Now, in their depths, glimmers of trust shone like stars breaking through the twilight. Silas took a step closer, his shadow merging with hers, a silent vow etched between them. He reached out, brushing a stray hair behind her ear, a gesture tender yet profound. The world around them hummed softly, the rustling leaves echoing the warmth that bloomed in their hearts. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, they stood together, side by side. A quiet cowboy and a girl once deemed cursed, two souls intertwined, growing in the golden light of a new beginning.